I know we have Saquon Barkley at a great number for Offensive Player of the Year. It's kind of worrisome now, or it takes a worry away from us, I should say, that Tyreek Hill doesn't have his quarterback to throw him touchdown passes. See where I'm coming from with that?
Nah, totally, man. Look, you don't wish injury on anyone.
Mm-hmm.
You never want to see that happen, especially a guy like Tua who has battled injury after injury. And, dude, you know what else I was thinking about with Tua, bro? Another reason why I feel like this is being magnified is because he's gotten hurt in prime time. Like the Bengals game when he got hurt, the first one, it was a Thursday night football game. And it's the same thing in betting. We talk about the standalone factor. The line moved 2 points in favor of the Titans against the Jets after everyone saw the Jets lose to the Niners. You had all that hype coming in. They lose to the Niners. You have an over-adjustment into week 2. Then the Jets cover, right? We always talk about there's not a spot I personally like more in betting. We'll get to it at the end of the show with the picks. Than a good team, what I perceive to be a good team, a real legitimate contender, losing in a primetime spot, the line movement that happens against them. Perfect example, your Saints with the Eagles, 6-point line move, bro.
Oh, I know.
Because you have the Saints winning a 2-game winning streak, and they beat a public team. Yeah, they beat a public team like the Cowboys, and then Philly loses at the buzzer pretty much against the Falcons, and you see it on primetime, right? And to tie it into Tua, we've seen him get hurt in primetime. It's the only thing on TV. And then everyone quickly rushes to conclusions and to make assumptions and say, dude, got to retire. Think about your family. I mean, we've went over that, but I just found it really interesting how that's happened on primetime, and that's why it gets magnified so much. What it means for Tyreek Hill, what it means for the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins are toast. I think this eliminates them unless they could stay 500 by the time he comes back. And if he comes back, this is him being ruled out until week 8.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that he'll be able to come back in week 8, especially with now. I can only imagine the heat the Dolphins would take, McDaniels would take, the organization would take. If they do trot him out there and then he gets hurt again, lawsuits, who knows, right? We're not lawyers.
You mean
here.
when he gets hurt again? Like, football's a violent game. Even players that have been notoriously healthy throughout the season, they will have games in which they come out for multiple possessions, or potentially the rest of the game, but they'll make it back and they make that reputation. But it would happen again. I want to convince you though that they aren't toast. And I will go back to the reasons that I listed why I felt Tua was an average quarterback. They've built an offense that is easy. And it still has the same amount of speed with or without Tua on the field. Is Skylar Thompson capable of throwing a, 15-yard pass to left right down the line of scrimmage? I think he is. And that he's going to have to get comfortable and confident and extending the ball out to Tyreek Hill on some play action plays. But Nick, don't lose hope. Like, speed kills in the NFL, bro. It is the one thing that has remained consistent. When you watch the Patriots for the past 3 years, what's the one thing that jumps off the page to you? They're slow as shit.
All their skill position players run a 40 as fast as I do.
When you have the speed, you can win ball games.
Yeah.
That was really generous of you, by the way. I've never seen you actually sprint. That would be...
Nah, I was never fast. I was always like a cardio dude. Like when I played, I grew up playing soccer.
Yeah.
I always, when you would watch me, and Jory would understand this because he's a soccer guy. When you watch me the first 5 minutes and then you watch me the last 5 minutes of the game, I looked the same.
Yeah,
it was because I was never fast. I wasn't explosive. I was quick but slow, if that makes sense. Like speed, 40-yard dash.
Okay, you're using soccer for Jory. He understood that reference.
Okay.
Give your NFL quarterback comparison. Are we talking Peyton Manning?
No, not that slow. I would say probably
he's the
like
same speed.
I'd probably say like Aaron Rodgers. Not now Aaron Rodgers, but like Listen, a third and 7, I could scoot and pick up like 12
That's being
yards.
very generous because I would say that early Aaron Rodgers teetered on the border of fast and explosive.
Yo, you know who I used to model my game after? Or at least try to. Clearly would try to. Tony Romo.
Wow.
Now
that's the best that makes sense.
Like being like elusive and footwork in the pocket and being able to move, like shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's a better one than Rodgers.
Wow. Shout out to Tony Romo.
Tony Romo, bro.
Who would have thought he would have got a plug on this show?
Shout out to Tony Romo, man. One of the most he was overrated, but I think his career has aged well that he was underrated. Dude was a Band-Aid for the Cowboys, bro. That team was such a mess if you really look into what they had when he was there and some of the players they would bring in and the character issues. This guy was solid, man. He just couldn't win in the playoffs, which has been the track record for the Cowboys now for almost 30 years. So, yeah, shout out to Tony Romo, man. He was dope.
So we got to this all because of the speed and the Dolphins.
Yeah, and I had to make it about myself because I tend to do that.
No, I told you to make it about yourself.
Yeah.
The offensive player of the year bet, though, like you're feeling confident, Tyree, at least with the Dolphins. Who else would you feel like is worrying you right now that is kind of giving Saquon a run for our money?
So at the moment, the favorite is Saquon Barkley at 7-1, followed by Ceedee Lamb at plus 725.
That's close.
Then you have Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill at 12-1. Nico Collins at 14-1. Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall at 15-1. I'm not going to continue down the list, but those are the top of the names. The player that concerns me the most is Ceedee Lamb. I know he's the one that's tied essentially with Barkley at the top, but the volume's going to be there. For them to be good, it has to run through Ceedee Lamb. Everything has to go through him. Maybe he's the rare exception where he had a career year last year, but he's still young in his career, where maybe that might turn out to be like a down year for him. You don't know how it's going to transpire. Right. But the volume and the targets that he gets, he's the one that I'm the most concerned about. And then if you look down the list, man, you have a lot of guys with injury concerns, right? Now, Tyreek isn't injured, but his quarterback is. Justin Jefferson got banged up. Nico Collins has come out the gates firing, but you also have Tank Dell there. You have Jordan, the tight end. You have Schultz. Mm-hmm. You have Joe Mixon. Obviously, you have Stephon Diggs. So there's a lot more that you have to worry about on that offense. As far as like CJ Stroud spreading the ball around. So I would say Ceedee Lamb is the one that concerns me the most, man. And on top of that, obviously, he needs to stay healthy throughout 17 games. But, bro, I know he dropped that pass on third down and he put a lot. He basically blamed himself, he being Saquon Barkley, that they lost that game. But, bro, he had another 100 yards from scrimmage. I don't know why they didn't feed him the ball more, because every time he was running the ball in the first half, it looked like he was getting 9 yards a carry, it seemed like. And again, I say this all the time because I don't like shitting on people and saying, yo, you don't know ball. But sometimes people talk and they just don't know ball. It looks the way it does for Saquon with the Eagles because the Giants didn't have that. The Giants had nowhere near the offensive line that Philly has. Nowhere near the weapons that Philly has, the scheme, all that. And that's why when he's running the ball, it looks like, holy shit, he's picking up 9 yards a carry. Where in New York, you don't pay him, you let him walk because he was just going to run into his center for 1.8 yards per carry.
Yeah.
And the team isn't a running back away. And yeah, was he the best player on the team? Clearly. But that's why. It doesn't look the same because the team isn't the same. And I'll keep saying this because people are idiots and they just don't understand the simple shit. That's why. One team had a 10.5 win total. The other one had a 6.5 win total for that reason.
And it's the offensive coordinator trying to get a little too cute with it. They have Kellen Moore, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And this is something that I've been identifying with a lot of offensive coordinators they try to get everybody involved early, right? They get it programmed in their head that like everybody needs to rev up at the same time for this offense to be efficient, and you don't have to worry about your receivers becoming divas at halftime saying, "Hey, bro, throw me the damn ball." When you run the ball well, there's nothing else that you need to do. I that's the one thing that great football teams will identify, and I hope the Eagles start to develop that a little bit more with him. The one player, and I don't know if you still have the odds up. What about Alvin Kamara?
Alvin Kamara actually is the first name after where I stopped.
Okay. All right, because I was about to list off. He almost has 200 yards over these past 2 games. He had rushed for 198. He's got 4 touchdowns. Receiving wise, he's gotten 7 receptions, not 92 yards and a touchdown. So he's got the possibility to have the production level that warrants competing with Barkley. We're going to find out. This is a really big game in terms of how people view the two. Do you see a drastic flip if, let's say, Alvin Kamara goes off and Saquon has a shit game this week?
It could be. It could be. That's definitely the game of the week on the slate.
Mm-hmm.
As far as what you said, I think was perfect because that's the game I'm the most excited about. It's Philly and the Saints, and I think it's because it's going to say a lot about both teams. Does Philly bounce back after a primetime loss? Are the Saints legit? They just handled the Cowboys. Now, if they could do that again to another favorite in the conference, now you're like, all right, bro, this is a serious thing. Because we've seen it in the past, right? We were talking about Sam Darnold on the Monday show, how everyone is excited about Sam Darnold. And let's not forget, with the Panthers, he was 3-0. And then I believe they lost 7 or 8 games in a row after that. But during that run, they didn't have no wins like what the Saints might have.
Yeah.
And they're playing extremely well, man. They're playing really well. And Derek Carr is balling. And Kamara, like you said, man, he has 4 touchdowns. And they did this all without Marshawn Lattimore last week, who's their number one.
That was the most impressive part about the entire game. And it's just tough. It's just like there's not been anything bad about this Saints team. And Nick, you and I know better than anybody. Stats don't lie. You can't be perfect all the time. Is this the game where the offense doesn't click for the first half? You maybe get 3 points in the first half. How do you react then when you've gotten officially punched in the mouth? That worries me greatly about the Saints. I've bought in ever since Monday's show. My Saints right now are the scariest team in football, and I've bought into it. But shit, dude. I know how quick it could turn south because they haven't seen bad football yet this year at all.
Yeah, but I think they've handled a good team in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they were 2-0 and they played the Panthers and the Giants, I've been all right. You play who's on your schedule. Totally agree. But then it goes back to one of the best calls I ever made, bro. And shouts to Dom, editor Dom. This is when he first started like working with me and cutting up the clips when he was interning. It was when the Ravens played the Pats that year that New England was undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
And they were 3-point favorites in Baltimore. And it was a Sunday night football game. And I remember Lamar Jackson. This is the year Lamar won the MVP.
Yeah, he went crazy that game.
Lamar, primetime slot. Again, the primetime factor, bro. If you have a monster game on primetime, second half of the season, it fucking skyrockets your odds. And I remember saying the Ravens were like plus 130 to win that game. But I said, instead of that, why don't you bet Lamar? Because at the time he was in the conversation for MVP. Bet him at 9-1 for MVP. And then bam, they beat the shit out of the Pats. He goes on to win MVP. But I bring up that game because they were 8-0, 9-0. And they were playing the then Bengals, like post Andy Dalton or Andy Dalton Bengals. They're playing the Blake Bortles Jaguars. They're playing shitty teams. And you're like, all right, bro, you're 9-0, but you haven't played anyone. Remember Pittsburgh a couple years ago? They were 11-0 and they played no one good. And you're like, how good is this team?
Right.
So, you can be undefeated, But it's the same thing in the fight game. You look at a fighter and you say, are they getting old? They're 4-2 in their last 6 fights. But yeah, he's fought 2 title fights, the number 1 contender, the number 4 contender, and this hot prospect that everyone's been ducking for 4 years. And that's why he's 4-2. It's like who you face and who you beat matters. And when you do play a shitty team, it needs to look like week 1 where they beat the shit out of this shitty team.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think if you're a Saints fan, you should definitely feel confident, man. And then also if you're an Eagles fan, you got some trends that are not in your favor, man. Jalen Hurts, 1-8 against the spread in his last 9 games. He's now 28-2 against the number in his career.
Oof.
Jalen Hurts, if you look at worst QBs on the money line since December 1st last season, Hurts was 35-14 straight up entering this stretch. Only Bryce Young has a worse record.
Jesus.
1-7 straight up at minus $575 if you were betting the money line of all of Bryce Young's games. Then Jalen Hurts is 2-7 straight up, minus $609. So the Eagles, remember last year they were 11-1, and then he started getting hurt, and they kind of like limped into the playoffs, and they lost in that first round against the Bucks. So it's going to be a banger of a game, man. I'm really excited for this one. The Saints, bro, your Saints, 15 drives with the starters, 15 scores.
Yeah, I know. That's what
They've scored on all 15 of their drives to start games this year.
That's winning the lot. Nick, what would the odds have been on that?
Just bet every drive to be a touchdown and roll it over.
You would have.
That would be fucking crazy, bro.
That's what I'm saying. It's an anomaly. So I don't want to overreact. I have bought into the Saints. Fucking curb your enthusiasm. If they don't play well this week, go back to the NFL preview show and listen to my take then, because it will be extremely accurate if they don't play well. Yeah. I was gonna bring up because I'm thinking of different ways to kind of help formulate my betting mind. What was the highlight that comes to your mind when you think of Saints versus Eagles? Go. Highlight that comes to mind: Saints versus the Eagles.
Wasn't that when Reggie Bush got smoked?
Yes. Okay. So follow me on this theory here.
Okay.
I just struggled to bet on teams that have the highlight not go in their favor. So like every time, like the Saints need to have, maybe this is the game, right? Alvin Kamara like hurdles somebody and it just completely changes.
They also lost with Nick Foles to them in the playoffs where Alshon Jeffrey dropped the pass. That was the same year that the Jared Goff Rams Saints play happened.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, continue.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think about that for all these different games. I'm like, what is the biggest highlight that I remember from these two teams? I don't know, taken into consideration.
Yeah, I also feel like that was, 15, 20 years ago?
It doesn't matter.
It might have been, not 20, but it might have been like 17 years ago.
So maybe that's what I'm banking on. Maybe if the Saints could have a highlight play, then this is just going to be a long run. I'm worried also about the Saints playing them so early in the year. I feel like the Saints play the Eagles better in like December in Philly. Like that's a Saints trap game, my favorite spot for them to be in.
In his element, I'm a gold medalist, bronze like your medal is. So many deer in headlights, but it's bedtime. Hear that supper bell, main course, beat of venison. Dab. Most dangerous game. Either kill or be